All right, so I have a presentation around building an Agile Pack, and I'm going to explain what it means with the focus on remote collaboration in estimation and planning. As we were discussing the title of the presentation in our company, we had a bit of a fight how to call it. I'm a geek, so I always propose geeky names. So instead of Agile Pack, I suggested Agile Pack. It just sounds slightly better to me. All right, this is my way of actually being, doing this my way. So a few words about myself. My name is Bartek Gatz. I'm a product manager working in a company called Spartas. This is my email address in case you wanted to give me a shout later on. I am a product manager there for a little less than a year. But previously I worked for over 3 years at Atlassian. I was one of Jira product managers. And some of the things that I will discuss today are actually coming from the earlier experience at Atlassian. So a few words about Spartas. We are a platinum experts for Atlassian Marketplace. We are based in Gdańsk in Poland. Have just below 100 employees at the moment. We are still growing. Have 9 products on Atlassian Marketplace, but we have also expanded just recently onto Microsoft Marketplace with our most successful solution. We are present in 50 countries around the world and have over 3,000 customers. All right, so the topic of remote collaboration is quite wide, but before I dive into the solutions, I wanted to outline some of the problems that you might face with remote collaboration, and I think these problems can be divided into 3 main categories. The first one is that there is no face-to-face contact between team members if they are working from remote locations. The second is that potentially there are completely different time zones in which they work. And finally, the third one is that in the culture in which we are saturated in our original culture impacts the way how we communicate, and this differences in culture can actually make it quite difficult to get proper understanding between people. So first is the face-to-face contact, and I don't think that I have to convince you that it's really, really important for people to really understand each other and have this sort of proper interaction with just being in the same room and exchanging the comments and also emotions. And some of the scientists say, and of course you can question these numbers, but some of the scientists say that in some scenarios, up to 85% of the communication is a non-verbal one. Of course, in case of typical technical communication, this ratio is probably the opposite, but even if it's just 15% of communication, it happens on the emotional level, through gestures and facial expressions, different intonation, or just anything else that is not that you cannot put into text. This might profoundly impact the quality of the communication and understanding on the other side. So this is the first problem, the face-to-face communication. The second is the time zone difference. I mentioned that I was working as a Jira product manager with Atlassian, and in this setup I was working from Gdańsk in Poland with the headquarters of Atlassian being located in Sydney. Depending on the time of the year, we had either 8 hours of time zone difference or 10 hours of time zone difference. We moved the daylight saving time into opposite directions because Sydney is on the southern hemisphere. So with 8 hours of time zone difference, it's almost impossible to have a convenient working hours where both of the teams in 2 locations are in the same room, in the office at the same time. With 10 hours, it's really impossible to have a convenient working hours. So this is a problem in itself as well. Finally, the third is the culture in which we are saturated, which might impact the way how we communicate. And you will probably have thousands of different examples on this one. I will just give one, which is probably equally visible in Poland as it is in Germany. If you ask someone, how are you, you generally expect that person to answer you how he or she is. In the US, this is just a way of saying hi. You do not expect the person to suddenly open to you and say and speak about all the life problems that they have. So this is a small thing, but there are many such examples, and they actually impact the way how we make certain shortcuts in communication, how this misunderstanding can later show up. So these are the problems. What do companies do to work around these problems? A lot of companies create a set of guides called Code of Conduct that basically impose the way of behavior and the way of communication between team members. At Atlassian, at the time that I was working there, and actually this is still the case, it is more encouraged to, instead of imposing such set of rules, to encourage people to adopt certain culture. So instead of code of conduct, Atlassian is working on the culture of conduct. It's just a question of human nature. If we are forced to adopt something, we are more likely to reject it, instead of adopting something which we believe will make us cool. So culture of conduct works better. And just as a quick example, I was actually privileged to create one of such recommendations for the culture of work. It was called 10 Commandments of Remote Collaboration back then. I'm not going to go through all of the commandments, just give you one of the example, which was actually commandment number 4, which basically said that in case you need to communicate with someone who is remote, please use HipChat. Just make sure that this person, do you all know what HipChat is? It's basically an instant messaging system. Just mention that person, bring him to the table, to the discussion, make sure that the person is up to date with all the information. What it means is that, what I'm actually trying to say here is that effective remote collaboration can only be assured with a combination of this aforementioned culture, but also tools. The tools are very important to make sure that the culture works, and you can only make it possible if you have proper tools. Which leads me to the topic of the presentation. It was just a bit of an introduction, to be honest. So what is an Agile Pack? How do I define an Agile Pack? This is a totally made-up definition, but just for the sake of this presentation. This is a set of tools that are aiding in the transformation towards Agile methodologies, or help with the maintenance of Agile methodologies, and encourage the Agile culture of work and collaboration. And each of the companies that wants to become Agile or are Agile and want to sustain this agility, they will probably face a situation where they have to select the tools that they use for basically for their teams. And again, this was a bit of an introduction to the actual point of this presentation. One of such tools that each company might consider useful is a tool that allows for the planning and estimation process for the sprint iteration, for the sprints and iterations. And this process might look completely different depending on the fact whether your team is located in the same room or whether the team is in a completely different location. So in case of a local team, we have the privilege of working in the same time zone, obviously. We have a privilege of having the ability to communicate directly, and we can estimate the elements in the backlog in a synchronous way. So everyone can just sit down, spend an hour or two, discuss the very same things at the same time, and come up with a properly estimated backlog. In case of distributed teams, we might have completely different time zones. We will most likely not be able to communicate directly with the other team members. And that calls for asynchronous estimations, where people do not have to actually sit on the same call or spend time overnight to synchronize with guys in the other time zone. So let's take a look at the local teams. This is an easier case. We have a tool that allows for the estimation based on the paradigm of the planning poker. Does anyone here not know what the planning poker is? Or maybe who is using the planning poker, or who has used the planning poker paradigm in the past? All right. So this is basically a type of approach where people synchronously vote on the estimations. I have a very short time frame for this, so the product demo is going to be just screenshots. Basic Jira backlog. You can see the button here at the top called Agile Poker. When I open this, I am able to join the existing planning sessions or create a new one if I am a Scrum Master. And here I'm going to use this, probably the gamers will know the split screen for the racing games and such like. So the top of the screen is something that the Scrum Master will see during such a planning session. The bottom of the screen is something that the regular team members will see. So the beginning of the session starts where the Scrum Master selects an issue to vote on. In this case, this issue is called Lambda 10. It has some description, and of course I can open the full details of this issue in Jira. Currently no one has voted, but the Scrum Master can select whether there is any time constraint for this vote. It can be 10 seconds, 60 seconds, and everyone can actually start voting on this. In this example, I just have 2 members of the team. Of course, the solution allows for as many team members as possible, and their avatars will show here next to the existing ones. So this is the first step, selection of an item to vote on. So the next step is that Kasia at the bottom has already voted. She has selected that this element is probably worth 3 story points, and her vote is displayed to her. But the Scrum Master and all the other team members at this stage do not yet know what she voted. They just know that she provided her vote. The next step is that Bartek at the top has voted as well. And when everyone has voted, or when the Scrum Master decides to show all the votes, they will be unveiled to everyone. So in this case, we see that we have 3 voted by Kasia and 5 voted by Bartek. There's a difference. That means that either the team does not really understand what the task is about, or they have different ideas about the complexity. It calls for a discussion. So we have a process of discussion. Everyone is sitting in the same room. We have a process of discussion. Finally, we need to restart the voting. So again, Kasia has voted 3 again, and this time Bartek has voted 3 as well. He got convinced by Kasia that this is probably a slightly simpler task than he originally thought. We have an agreement, so the Scrum Master at the top can assign 3 as an estimation, which is going to be saved in the estimation field in Jira. The process continues for all the issues that we wanted to estimate. So in this case, probably the Scrum Master is going to be the person using the desktop computer, but all the other invitees to the session will most likely prefer to use their cell phones and basically vote with as minimal device as possible for this process. So these are those 3 steps that we have just seen on the desktop and the way how they will be shown on the mobile device. I mentioned that the invitees get the link to this, and this is how you manage such a session. Each session has a name. It can be public so that anyone can join it. It can be private, which means that it's only visible for some team members. There's always a Scrum Master and the list of team members who participate in the voting. So this was the situation for the local team. Quite an easy setup. Everyone sits in the same room. We can use the planning poker, can use Jira and have a proper estimation. The more interesting scenario is where the team is distributed, because we do not have the privilege of working in the same room. It's not possible to synchronize. So yesterday we have released a new version of our product with the new mode of operation, inspired by the process, the methodology called Wideband Delphi. And this allows for asynchronous voting and asynchronous session on estimations. So again, a quick demo of the product. So it all starts with this screen where I can see all the sessions, all the planning and estimation sessions that have been created in the past. Initially, of course, the screen is empty, but when I create the asynchronous session, the first thing that I'm going to be asked is, what is the scope of issues that we want to vote on? So this is not just a selection of the single issue. You must remember that in this case, this is asynchronous. So we just give a bit wider set of tasks to the whole team. And the Scrum Master again can select either just something at the top of the backlog, or maybe the proposal for the next iteration. Some elements from the backlog are selected for this particular session. The next step, similarly to the previous mode, is to define the name of the session and to invite participants and maybe give them a bit of an information by what time do we need to finish this session. So maybe there is already a meeting in the calendar that says that is designed for the planning session. Maybe you want to add just a simple information, and please complete this by the end of Wednesday business day so that we could start working on the planning on Thursday. But basically this content becomes the content of an email sent to all the participants. So such a session gets created. It's now listed on the list of sessions, and everyone who clicks on the link can start participating in such an asynchronous voting session. So again, a split screen, Scrum Master view at the top, and the regular users view at the bottom. As you can see, the Scrum Master has slightly more options to choose. He or she can close the voting at any point in time, or actually take a look at the partial results or delete the session. But it's more interesting to see how the session looks like. So when users open the actual session, on the left they will see the list of issues to vote on, the scope of the session. The right-hand side initially is just a little help screen that says how to operate in this. So when the users select an issue to vote on, they can provide their vote and they can provide additional comment. And previously, in case of the planning poker, everything needs to happen at the same time. Should I pause for a second?
Everything's fine.
All right. In this case, you can see that the Scrum Master started quite fast. So he or she has already voted and provided comments on the first 4 items from the list. At the same time, this example member of the team only voted on 1, but that's okay. As long as the session lasts, they can provide votes and comments in their own convenient time. With each of the votes, there is also a comment that also gets saved. So maybe sometime later, the Scrum Master was called to a meeting, he or she couldn't complete the session, but the other team members caught up and they actually voted on everything. Finally, after some time, everyone has voted, provided their votes for the estimations, and it is time to close the voting. This is something that the Scrum Master can perform. Yes, please.
And what about the discussions we can do in the...
Yeah, so this is where the comments get useful. Because once you close the voting session, this is what the Scrum Master sees for each of the elements from the backlog. So all the voting comments are provided here with all the information about the votes and the distribution of the votes. So if the distribution is very narrow, it means that everyone is in agreement. There is no need to discuss it anymore. It is just okay to select the final estimation and save it to Jira. In case there are discrepancies in the votes, all these voting comments get saved, and once the voting is restarted, everyone can see the comments from other people. So you do not have to call for a video conferencing call. You do not have to send it out in an email. It gets just restarted and everyone can see other people's comments from the previous session.
And this is comments in context of voting, or is it just issue comments?
No, these are comments in the context of voting. So they do not get saved as the regular comments.
Okay,
the regular
discussion about the topic to be voted on. For example, in the first direct way, we can discuss directly about the kind of complexity, common understanding.
Yeah.
Is this possible in this way as well?
Well, if it requires like a proper face-to-face discussion, no. For that, you will probably need HipChat or Google Hangouts or Skype or maybe even an on-site visit if it's a really, really difficult one. But
no, can I ask questions about comments? Or can I start an offsite?
Oh, you mean just to follow up to, for instance, this one? Not in this version, unfortunately. It's just a traction of, it's just a single-threaded sort of list of comments. That's a good question. So once the Scrum Master goes through all these and potentially in some cases restarts the voting on some of these issues, eventually the team will come with the distribution which is quite narrow, and it makes it possible for the Scrum Master to put the final vote as an estimation for the process. So to sum up, interactive session, asynchronous session, same time zone, direct communication. We are in a privileged situation. We can do it in a very synchronous way. In asynchronous session, different time zones, indirect communication, asynchronous estimating, which translates to the fact that here we are very effective from a timing perspective. We might say in 2 hours I want this part of the backlog to be estimated, and in 2 hours it will be done. In this case, it's not possible to be very effective from the timing perspective, but it's possible to be effective from the convenience perspective, right? So no one has to work over hours. No one has to join some really weird meetings at night just to make sure that they follow up. No one. You do that in your own convenient time. In this case, both the comments as well as the actual votes get discussed live, but they are not saved anywhere, right? So it's just they just happen face to face. It will be an overhead to write everything down. We want to be very effective from a timing perspective, right? So they get lost. In this case, they are saved. So for the later use, I can always go back and see what the comments were, what the votes were. I can use them, for instance, during the later retrospective meetings to make sure that our voting process gets improved later on. But in both cases, what is interesting, we come up with a situation that all the estimations are actually consensus-based. So each of the team members had a way of impacting the final vote and hopefully has a good understanding of how the voting came to the actual conclusion. So I mentioned that each of the company probably has to build such an Agile Pack. This is just one of the products that we hope will be useful for building the Agile Packs among your companies. We have also, this product actually is called Agile Poker Enterprise. As I said, the latest release was just launched yesterday. We also have another called Agile Cards that I was demoing during the day today. What I would like to ask you is basically for the information how you deal with your Agile Packs. What are the tools in your set of, your selection of tools for maintaining Agile culture in your companies? How do you measure this, how do you measure this effectiveness? And how often do you revalidate whether the Agile Pack is actually useful in your companies? In all of these cases, I'm really all ears. If there are any gaps in Agile Packs that you would like to have filled, this is an opportunity for us to build a new product as well. So in this case, definitely talk to me. And that's it. Thank you.